sometimes I look back and I'm like, were we in a cult? Were we in a cult and was Freelee our ringleader? If you guys are new here, back in the old YouTube days, I actually went by the alias Supreme Banana, and I was actually deeply involved in what was, before it went up in flames, the vegan community. I look back and I'm like, what the fuck? I was so like brainwashed thinking like this is the way to eat, the only way to eat. Freelee says it's great and Freelee's so skinny, that means it must be working for me. And I completely would bypass like the fact that I felt like crap. And of course I'm saying this in a totally biased way because I remember being in my shoes in this time and I remember being so obsessive over what I was eating. So maybe you guys watching, you're like, oh, that's not that bad, it actually looks pretty healthy, but I just know my mindset at the time wasn't healthy. But it's healthy now, and I think what's like gotten me to be healthy now, like mentally, with food is stopping with the freaking restrictions, like the intense restrictions, like no oil, high carb, low fat, raw till 4, like only eating raw till 4 p.m. Like you bet your ass I wanted to eat cooked food like before 4, but I would force myself to just eat fruit before that because Freelee said so.
If someone told me, say, 5 years ago, that in 2019 I would be living off-grid in the jungle with a man from Sweden, I would have laughed out loud. I wouldn't have believed it. I lived in the city for 20 years, and I know most of you do too. City life is pushed as the most desirable lifestyle, and as a result, more than half the world's population now inhabits cities and towns. Sure, it's fast-paced, exciting, stimulating, and convenient for some things. However, it comes at a price. This high-stress environment is also a place of immense spiritual burnout. The instant gratification lifestyle leaves us highly vulnerable and with an unhealthy dependency on an unstable system. And you may think, well, I don't live in a tropical place, so I couldn't do this. Well, that is not true. Although the tropics suits your frugivore genetics best, and I do recommend you find a way to move to a warmer location, you can still create your own little food forest paradise on as little as half an acre of land and store and preserve fruits and vegetables for times of scarcity. Obviously, some countries are harder than others, but there are regions throughout America, for instance, where this can be done.
Freelee is indeed the leader of a cult. It's just not a terribly successful cult. You don't need to have thousands of followers to be a cult leader. You don't even need to have hundreds. When you go down the checklist for what it is that defines a cult, 3 of the most important check marks to be found there will be encouraging the followers to reject the authority of their own parents, to rebel against or separate themselves from the family unit, convincing the followers to reject worldly authority, which, yes, includes people like political leaders, but also medical doctors and so on, to disregard what those people say because they're all part of an evil conspiracy, and to instead, primarily or only, respect the advice and perspective of the cult leader. And yeah, another huge check mark is calling on your followers to reject mainstream society entirely, to go and live on a commune, to go and live in seclusion, to start a new society, to start a new world or a new life that is more strictly in keeping with the moral strictures set down by the cult leader and that are incompatible with this world inhabited by you and I. Freelee is a cult leader. Her cult has become much less popular in the last 5 years, and the ideal of how a modern woman ought to live has become more demanding in the last 5 years, to the point of becoming unattainable or unappealing to the vast majority of her former viewers. Let's remember, the shallow end of the pool 5 years ago had a lot to do with personal vanity, personal purity too, but the potential for personal success. You too could lose weight, look great, make the world a better place, get on social media and pursue fame, just like Freelee. That was the package deal 5 years ago. Today, she's telling you, you need to start prepping for the collapse of Western society. Today, she's telling you a lot of right-wing conspiracy theories about the banking system. Today, she's telling you that you need to go and buy a few acres of land and start growing and preserving all of your own food so you can be self-reliant when the collapse comes. The idealized life Freelee is presenting to her audience is more cult-like than ever, and the sacrifices she's demanded of her audience so they can live up to her moral standards have become harder and harder to make. Abandoning all your worldly possessions to go and live in the jungle has a certain timeless appeal to it. Some cults invite you to leave this society to join or start a new society, another society. When you look at this map you see on screen, this is Auroville in southern India. This is a cult group who built a whole city to house the followers of Sri Aurobindo and his wife, who was simply referred to as the mother. If that doesn't sound like a cult to you yet, I mean, I don't know what does, but these were people who said, hey, quit your day job, leave your family and your home life behind, come and live in a whole new place, in a whole new part of the world with this distinctive style of architecture that still to this day draws tourists and admirers. Just like Vatican City, in one part, what they're doing here is building another sort of Disneyland. But not all cults offer you a community. Some of them instead invite you to reject society, to take your own solitary path, to live a monastic existence, whether that be in the jungle, in the desert, or in a cave. And what's interesting to see with Freelee in the last 5 years is that she had her heart broken, and she shifted from type 1 to type 2. She shifted from the community building, leadership model of a cult to the renunciate monastic model of a cult, where she is no longer holding meetups with thousands of people embracing her, flocking to get a selfie with her, where she is no longer inviting people to come and join her in Chiang Mai. She is no longer trying to build a vegan future, a vegan community, a city on the hill. And you know what? I wouldn't put it past her. I think she could have accomplished something very much like Auroville. I can easily imagine young architects jumping at the opportunity to build an ideal tourist destination for vegans that is in one part cult compound and another part Disneyland. She took that community building road as far as she could She had her heart broken, and she now instead is on the narrow, winding path to nowhere, and inviting you also as her follower to go and find your own little patch of jungle, to go and find your own little patch of forest, and start growing your own mangoes, start making your own papaya chutney, so on and so forth. That you also can lead this utterly isolated life of a renunciate, of a totally morally pure monastic figure in the middle of the forest, accomplishing nothing and going nowhere. Whereas previously, that community building phase of her cult leadership had something a little bit more revolutionary about it, didn't it? Before, there was just that possibility that people were going to get motivated to do something more than lose weight, look great, become an athlete, become a social media influencer. There was something about saving the world. And now her cult is all about leaving the world behind.
My slang is editorial, explicit material, briefcase show, live and stereo flow, feel me.